Thank you all so much for joining this month. Thank you for coming to the February meeting of the Library Marketing Book Club. I'm very excited to have you all here today. We this month we read Break the Wheel, Question Best Practices, Hone Your Intuition, and Do Your Best Work by Jay Acunzo. Hope y'all had a chance to read some, if not all, of the book, or are familiar with Jay and some of his ideas, maybe even listen to his podcast, which, according to the book, has a lot of these topics in it. But anyway, it should still be we'll still have a good time talking and see what things are going on. But thanks so much everybody for joining. So just to get rolling, so from those who had a chance to read some or all the book, um, what were some things that stood out to you? What were some things that you noticed about the book that you thought was valuable or thought was a good something to question, or so what'd you think?
I really like that it gives you permission to say that might be the industry best practices, but it won't necessarily work here. Just
Yeah.
because it says you should fill in the blank doesn't mean we should.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Tammy. I think that was, yes, that hit very hit home for me with a lot of
Yeah.
often many of the folks that we work with are always asking like, well, what are other, and again, other libraries absolutely have wonderful ideas and great ideas and other organizations have interesting ideas and other things to do, but it's good to know what those are, but maybe not to strive to do that. So Anna, your mic was on. I didn't know if you had something to what'd you think?
Well, I did, Tammy. I really liked that too. I thought that was really helpful. I think the part that stood out to me the most, and now I'm looking through my notes because I wanted to make sure was the part where he said it's not about having the answer, right? Like the answer will always change, so you have to always be learning, and you're not the expert. No one's the expert, but as long as you continue to like learn and be, aware and curious. And I thought that was so empowering. I just like I'm gonna carry that one with me. I don't have to know the answer, but
Right.
I'm not the expert, but we're all here learning and growing. I loved that. That was big.
Yeah, I think so. I thought so too. I thought it was very strong in the book, and I wasn't honestly expecting I didn't know what to expect of all of this book, though, because every time I've heard Jay talk, he's he's like he's sort of a futurist and definitely a very smart person who has these really interesting ideas and really can clarify things. But yeah, I thought the same thing, and it was like, yeah, and I have a million notes myself, but yeah, about you don't have to be the expert and then kind of the other one that hit me there was and now I can't remember what the actual quote was, but that Charlie Munger quote of it's better to be
Vaguely
like
right than
vaguely
precisely
right.
wrong.
Yeah, vaguely right than precisely wrong. Yeah, exactly. So big thing to really look at, trying to go. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us encounter that when we are trying to look for what is the right answer, what is the right thing to do before we go ahead and launch and do it. But it can be so paralyzing, and if you're reasonably right, if you've got most of the things going, it's a good way to kind of I thought that was the same thing, very refreshing, very empowering. Jay, I think, has a good a good mind to keep to give marketers a voice and not just be, kind of falling to having to get everything right so it succeeds immediately and so it does everything. And the one that I really liked was the kind of along those lines, and may even been in that section, was about him. Um, Maybe this wasn't that same section, but it's the one where he was riding the dirt bike or riding the motorbike. So yeah, he had all his, and if you hadn't had a chance to read the book, he had all all the kids from the neighborhood would tear around on dirt bikes all the time, and he was kind of a scared and anxious little kid about trying to do it. But the one time that he did it, he got on and he um, got right there in the saddle and started the bike up and drove right into a tree. But he had so much fun because he actually did it. So it wasn't about him being this perfect rider from the start, but about, doing something and learning something from it. So yeah, right. You don't have to have all the right answers right away. So yeah. And by the way, I did reach out to Jay, and I don't know where, and I had some messages that I don't think made it, but then at the, like few days before, I mentioned like how we were really excited that we're reading his book and really looking forward to talking about it, and if he could join us it'd be great. He mentioned that he's underwater and launching his new show, How Stories Happen, so he wasn't going to be available. And but he did say like that we were reading it, it made him do a happy dance. So it was very nice to hear a little something from him, even though he couldn't participate. So yeah. So yeah. So what other thoughts about the book? Kind of some of your impressions or what kind of things stuck out that you took away? Looking
I
through my
think one
notes
of
for
my
some.
longest lasting ones is
Mhm.
going to be and his series of questions of who is it for? What is it for? How will you know if it worked?
Yeah.
And if nothing else, I will be applying those as we talk about new new projects, new acquisitions. We're constantly asking our students, what do you need to be successful that
Yeah.
we can provide? Because we are not the student sitting in the classroom. We don't always know. And so, I could say what I think they need, but I would probably be wrong. But that,
No.
and just the stories were fabulous. And
Yeah.
those will stick a long time.
Yeah, I wasn't, yeah, no, I agree, Tammy. I think that always keeping those questions back about what is it for, who is it for, and how is it going to be measured to be how when it's successful is so important. And we see it in a lot of books and certainly we hear it a lot in a lot of presentations and things, but it's always something that is super important. And it was cool. I think he had some good kind of a good take on some of those questions, like right near the end of the book about, what kind of inspiration, um, and I forget I can't even think of what the questions were right now, but it was about, making sure to question the right things and making sure to get in the right framework so you're not doing it. And that was the other thing that I thought, and kind of in the same way, is that um, the whole book was all about keeping things in context, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, I think it was pretty cool. Um, and that first story about the coffee. So again, if you haven't had a chance to read it, the very first story is about a coffee shop. And it's in Saratoga Springs, which is where I grew up. So that was super cool. I wasn't there when this coffee shop was there. This was what 10, 15 years ago. So I wasn't there anymore. But the community, it was great to hear about in my little hometown. And but the one thing that I thought was interesting, and I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about this, was with the kind of um that aspirational statement of setting when the Mike the coffee roaster set his sights on the goal of create the world's strongest coffee. I thought that that clarity was really, really cool. And I don't know, does anybody's library have something, or does anybody aspire to have something like that where you have that kind of clarity? I thought that was, to me, that was like, wow, if you could find a guiding, principle like that, where it was, just to, and I think, I mean, we have something in one document I know somewhere that's like, to become a learning, or to become a more literate community. Um, and I think that's still got a little bit of um, fluidity to it. That's not quite the same as to create the world's strongest coffee. But I don't know. I don't know if anybody's library or anybody thought about that particular statement. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, or anything similar, or something else in the book that you liked?
I serve a public library, and our
Mhm.
mission statement talks about making connections.
Mm.
So when we're thinking about programs, or when we're thinking about how we're going to communicate this, we're always trying to, what are we connecting? Who are we connecting?
Oh.
And we second half is we make the connections in order to spark ideas and new connections. So we
Mm.
make connections to make connections, and that may seem somewhat ambiguous, but it works for us.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Then to put, I mean, is there, Michelle, can you think of like an example of how, like, what would, do you have an example that might come to mind about, something that you've done that has made that connection and sparked a new connection? Is there something you can think
Yeah,
of?
so
Yeah.
we started a retired adults coffee group that the sole purpose was like to be social. And I thought, well, maybe, like every other week I'll bring in like checkers or a card game or something, but they're not gamers. They don't like gaming. But we started out with maybe, now I live in a community of under 7,000 people.
Yeah.
So my service area is under 10,000 for sure.
Yeah.
But we started out with a group of about 6 or 7 people coming to that group, and now we're up to pretty regularly about 15. And they
Wow.
do other things together. They check on each other, they exchange phone numbers. They we're doing some work at the library, so the room isn't available in March. They made arrangements to meet somewhere else. So that's my success story of a connections that we made. We connected them to what the library has to offer, but then one step further, they're now connected to other people in the community.
That is very cool. That is a really neat application of that mission. That's great. That's very exciting. Um, yeah, and I would imagine that, yeah, that gets the word out in their community, and that's how it's been growing. So that's super cool, and that's really good. Um, there were, looking for some other notes that I had. Oh, and this one I thought was pretty cool too. Um, So, I really like this, and in Jay's speeches, he talks about um, asking the audience on a scale of 0 to 10, who here aspires to be a 5, and that was absolutely kind of captures that best practices. So, who aspires to be the best practice level, and I think that was a really interesting way to look at it, because that to me kind of helped clarify this idea of, what really is a best practice. So, is it that kind of right in the middle of the road that everybody's doing and kind of marginalized? And if you're looking to do that, if you're looking toward best practices to follow all those, then what kind of challenge does that make? So yeah. So anybody else have anything about that, about the aspiring to be a 5, or you know any that spark anybody else's ideas about anything? You know,
I didn't
yeah.
remember that part, but I mean, I loved this idea of the best practices. Before I worked at the library, I worked at a newspaper for
Hmm.
10 years, and I kind of I stopped right when the industry was kind of going going downhill, and the
Mm.
internet was but the newspaper hired this guy from he had worked in some other state at some large newspaper, and he had done well with the advertising. I was in the advertising design department, and so they brought him in, and he started putting out all of these things, all of these like marketing tactics that they had used successfully at the other newspaper, and one after another they just failed at our
Mm.
newspaper in our city, in our region. They were not what people needed or wanted. And it was kind of like this, it was just best practices
Yeah.
that worked somewhere else, and they just came in and just applied them in our area. And anyway, when I was reading that part of the book, I was thinking like, yes, I mean, that is just, it's what people cling to, and you just can't. It's not the answer, in, the same things don't apply. So I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, yeah, it's deceiving because it seems very safe. Like it seems safe to be going along with best practices. And again, I mean, I think, there are times where I've been had a manager that's been all about the best practices and this is what you have to, make sure you're looking at what this other organization like us is doing and make sure to keep up with them. And it's not bad idea to know what other people are doing so that you can kind of get ideas. But yeah, but it follows that pattern. It's like, okay, we do a best practice. Okay, well, it works for a little bit. Nope, then that drops off. Then we try another one. Nope, it drops off, and another one, and nope, it drops off. And it becomes this very frustrating cycle of feeling like you're lagging and feeling like you're behind and you know to me, and I don't know if I don't know who all uses like Chat GPT for stuff. Does anybody use? Yeah. So right. So it's kind in me that made me think of that. Like it's kind of like Chat GPT. Like you wouldn't want to, and maybe you do, but I don't know. You wouldn't necessarily want to use everything that comes right out of it. If you did, that would be pretty mediocre. You could just use what came out of it and throw it up there and make a bunch of social media posts and just take them verbatim, slap them in, and then you've got them done. But, that to me is that best practice level. And if you did that, it would, man, it might do all right, but it's going to be pretty mediocre and then it's going to drop. You have to do something. But, looking at that as the example and then saying, oh, okay, this inspires me to look at it this way and to expand on it this way. So it made me feel like kind of that use of, I don't know if anybody else feels that about ChatGPT or, I think it's pretty common now, right? ChatGPT is like, a great starting point. But despite what many TikTok and Instagram reels tell you, it's not always the magic solution to come up with 30 days of content right away. It can get you started, but it's not, to me, that's that kind of same level. But yeah, I mean, it's that's frustrating, Anna, when you're in an industry that's struggling and you're trying to come back just by doing what everybody else is doing and it just keeps failing. So, yeah.
I
Um,
loved his discussion of David Cancel and
oh,
his
yeah.
eliminating those
Oh, I
having to
know.
fill out the form to get to the content. Because I know how much I hate them. I will
Yeah.
drop a website like a hot potato if I have to give you information before you've given me anything. And so I really resonated with all of that. And, why are you doing that? I mean, if I'm going to not fill it out, why would I think my potential, patron would give me anything before I've given them anything? It kind of, to me, harkened back to the Superfans book and the,
Yeah, how so?
the whole idea of you have to give value before you will be gifted with their time and attention. And so that one just cracked me up because I found myself doing exactly that, looking at some of the food delivery, meal delivery things. It's like, why would I give you my mailing address and my credit card before I even know what you want to send me? That's just insane. So that one just made me laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's valuable information. And I'm going to admit that I was one who believed in that. And when I read it in this book, I was like, oh, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I believed a little more in that idea of popping up the form to get that. But then you're right, Tammy. You think of what's the experience like for me and what's the experience
Yeah.
like for other people that, that think that way. And yeah, that was super interesting. Somebody to come out of a HubSpot and create this entire marketing organization that basically does everything but that, but is super, super successful. So I thought that was another really great story. Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a really cool one.
I
Yeah.
was thinking about how that could apply, like we could apply that in, like, I realized I follow all of these news sources,
Mhm,
like Washington Post or New York, New
mhm.
York Times on Instagram, and they are forever like sharing this, like, wouldn't you like to know this tidbit of information? All you have to do is click on the link in our profile and read the article or sign up, and then you get to know the information. And I thought, like, we libraries could just be telling people cool things for
Yeah.
free. No click through, no anything, just right there in the post. Here's the information. And if you want, you can find out more. Or you can just go on with your life knowing, whatever it was, what food is highest in fiber or whatever, or not that, but something more interesting.
We've talked about that here. So I'm in a public library, also, and you, Michelle, and yeah, we've talked about, and some people do have the idea of like, well, and it's hard because, well, we should gate our content because it's for our library card holders. And it's a tough thing to, when you talk about the digital content, and I know there are some, and the thing that makes it difficult to navigate is that, with the digital data providers in the agreements, it includes like it's for your service area, like that's who it's intended for. Now we've done some things where we've really cracked down on, which I hate to say for a library, but we've really cracked down on people with cards who are no longer in the service area. So we just started, I don't know, does anybody else do this where we just started doing address validation? So we went through the address database and checked our ILS records against the address database, and anybody who was showing up is not any longer in the service area. Their cards don't work anymore. And they can certainly get them if they can either prove their address or if they're able to go and get an out of county library card. But yeah, but it's tough. To think about gating that content and how to do that. And Anna, but Anna, I think you bring up a good point. And even if we directed people to certain content in that post, in our sharing of information, I think you could still maintain your security, and if you want to call it security, and integrity of your service area, but you're still providing that information, and then that can entice other people who are in your service area or people that really wanted to or out to make that choice of then engaging with your library. But yeah, give them something of value first before you start putting up a wall. And when you talk about like Washington Post, I don't know if that's one of them, but many of these large newspapers now, you can't read an article without subscribing, and it's hard to swallow because that wasn't the case. And I understand why. I mean, it's a business, and they're not offering free content to the world. They're not a free library for the world, but yeah, so What else? Anybody else have other thoughts about the book? I'll keep going through my notes, but I would love to hear other people's impressions of some of the things we heard, if you had a chance.
I
think
also
that-
liked the comment that he made about that. I put sticky notes in my
Hey, nice.
entrepreneurs are masters at rallying others who already believe what they believe. They don't try to convert the skeptics. And
Yes.
so that is making me think about presentations I've seen about library challenges.
Yeah.
And that numerically, you really don't need that many people to be supporting you to survive a levy or anything else. That you really only need 25% of your population to be your advocates,
Yeah.
to be successful at these. And it's sort of that same idea of we spend too much time trying to convert the skeptics instead of making, again, the super fans of those that are already in our favor.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting comment.
Yeah, I made that same note too, Tammy. I just the other day I was listening to it and I made that same exact note. I was like, oh, because before sometimes when some of these books start talking about that the entrepreneur side, especially when they start getting into like the VCs and all that, makes me kind of dizzy because I don't understand all that stuff. But I think he did a great job of clarifying it, and I agree. I think that was so cool. So yeah, if you didn't get a chance, it's a neat concept of the way to be successful for what entrepreneurs are. People think that entrepreneurs are like trying to hard, the picture is this entrepreneur is like this hard selling people who's going out and trying to break into this challenging and difficult market, but it's really not that. It's entrepreneurs are ones who are looking to get the people that already believe, and they're really good at rallying people that already believe and getting that. There's another book, a little bit older book from the 90s, called Crossing the Chasm, that I don't know if I've put on our list of potential reads. But it has that same concept of it's not about getting it's not about going right after all the people that are on the backside of the curve, like you're late, that's why those people are late adopters and laggards to technology. The book is more about technology, but it's about adoption. And what you're trying to do is trying to get those early adopters and then that early middle so that you can move up the curve, and get that first 50, 60, 70%. And sometimes it does feel like a lot of things we try to go after, we're like, well, who's the group that's the hardest to reach? And now I so I don't know, sometimes I feel like I bear too much here. But hey, it's recorded and somebody can listen to it sometime and then come after me. I'm not going to say anything that hopefully that controversial, but I do think with teens, it's a tough audience, and like early 18s and early like 18 to 21s, that is a hard audience, and I think sometimes we spend quite a bit of energy going after it. I do think that I do think it's important for teens to have access to things, and I'm not saying that doesn't. And we also have a great framework, for well, for any library, but for a public library certainly, for teens that are uncomfortable looking up or trying to find information elsewhere, that they can come to a library and find things, and have the privacy and have have that kind of environment. And I think there should be library things for teens, but sometimes I think we look at going a little bit farther and we get so frustrated that we can't reach teens. But every bit of data we have seems to indicate that this is, this is not, this is a tough audience to get. And so, I think, you should, I mean, and hey, what do y'all think about that? Maybe it's a hot take. I don't know, but I'm again not saying we shouldn't go for teens, but I'm saying like the proportional amount of time we should spend on teens is going to be maybe a lot of energy on a small audience. And it's the same thing for like, I believe like that 18 to, 18 to 23 or 24. Um, it's another time where that, except other than when that's a young family, but singles in that range are going to be really tough to reach. So anyway, so anybody have any thoughts about that? Anybody agree? Anybody disagree? Anybody want to admit to agreeing or disagreeing?
I think that's just right, Chris. I think that's and it kind of goes back to Tammy, what you had brought up at the very beginning, just the question of, I forget what the actual wording was, but how do you know if this is correct, right? I mean, we have that issue here with our young adult department where it comes in waves for one thing. So it's hard to know from one 6-month period to the next, like, all right, can we expect 10 people at every event or can we expect 2?
Yeah.
Could do the same thing. And it's not that we're doing anything differently or incorrect. It's just the audience and people age in and out of it.
Yeah.
But I think I always try and push the idea of like decide or think about at least ahead of time what would make this successful. So like, okay, we're going to do a teen book club. Like, is it going to be disappointing for you if you put this on and 3 people show up, or is that what you're expecting? So if 6 people show up, then you're, going to be over the moon about it. So
Yeah.
I think that's just right. I think there's and with anything, age group wise, or bringing in a new collection or offering mobile hotspots that you haven't had before or whatever, just sort of, and this book, I think, brings it up, in a bunch of different contexts, but just to think about what is this? How do we know if this is doing what we want it to do? And to think about that before you start doing it a lot of times can be the key. I like this book too because it kind of lays bare. I talk about this all the time in these, but a lot of the like the business book, the entrepreneurial stuff that we read, it's a lot of aimed toward VCs. I mean, that kind of stuff like you brought up. Whereas what we do, what we try to offer is almost, it's not completely different, but it's kind of inverted.
Yeah.
We're not trying to create products to sell to people so that they'll give us their money. We already have the money that we're trying to figure out what would these people want us to do with it. So I think just, and a lot of, the best practice thing too, it's sort of like, yeah, this doesn't work for libraries a lot of the time because we're trying to do something different than Cold Blooded Coffee is trying to do. Like it's sort of similar, but not really the same thing. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that kind of thought and just the idea that one size doesn't fit all. And, we have that issue, and I'm sure they have the same issue with, charity water, or if you're trying to, increase enrollment at a after school program or so, there's a lot of things where it's like, okay, well, it's 85% the same, but then how do you square that? We're not trying to get anybody's credit card information. We don't want to make somebody subscribe.
Right.
It's a different thing that we're saying like, here's a thing we think you'll like. Do you want to come do it? Or, would you like to check this out for free? So it's sort of a different end goal, I think, than if we were trying to sell coffee.
Yeah. No, I think so, Keith. I think that's a good point. Yeah, and yeah, it is something that in a lot of these books that it is something to keep in mind, and it's nice. And I think, I mean, if you've ever heard Jay on other podcasts, he goes on a lot of podcasts that are hosted by people that are kind of in that, that VC and the and the businessy and the, those kind of worlds. But he always injects this very practical and he has just a great way of getting this kind of practical advice in and kind of taking it out of, because again, I think what I love is, like he's all about context and he's all about, what is the context, and he understands how to speak to that and how to and how to manage it. So no, Keith, I think it's great. In academic libraries, are there other like tough spots like that? Is there anybody here from, I can't really, if you're from an academic library, is there, is it like seniors are, just, forget about going after seniors because they're just graduating? Or, is there that other is there a demographic that's particularly challenging? Tammy?
We're a community college, and so our average student age is actually 29.
Okay.
And so because we are not a residence
Mm-hmm.
based
Mm-hmm.
college, it is all very, you don't see them if they don't have to be there for a class. They don't just come to campus.
Yeah.
And so getting participation in anything that is just for fun can be difficult,
Yeah.
unless you're offering food. But I would say just getting them to split their attention, I guess you'd say.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because they are there to take a class and leave. They have to go to
Yep.
work, they have to pick up their kids, they have to, and so it's, you don't have a captive audience, you don't have any
Yeah.
easy inroads, so you really have to do something to stand out and say, you know, this is worth your time.
Yeah.
So especially since they've been handing out laptops left and right, they don't need our computers as much, they don't, and they don't understand the difference between what you Google and what can actually be used in an academic setting.
Mm.
There's a lot of just interesting challenges that you don't see coming
Yeah.
until somebody sideswipes you with it and you're like, oh, well, yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think, yeah, that was pretty, yeah, I think, yeah, that's interesting because I don't know much about, the academic and the different types of academic libraries and what they do. But yeah, I mean, I think every business has those groups that they go after. And sometimes it seems like, and I'm not saying that I don't think that we are always wondering like, how do we get more teens? But it comes up a lot. And, um, so anyway, it's just an interesting, thing that I was thinking about. So, but but yeah, I'm trying to see a couple other things that I have so many notes here. Um, yeah, there was one in there too, and this was still probably along the same topic, which was we this was maybe this was even back to the beginning. Maybe it was we need to be more investigators than experts. Um, if instead, so it's we need to constantly admit that our thinking must be updated and revised on an ongoing basis. As soon as we believe we found the answer, we're at risk of getting complacent, shipping commodity work instead, and constantly updating or understanding the world. So I think, Tammy, that was even kind of what we were talking back at the beginning. So yeah, it's another note that I had, but I like that idea of acting like investigators rather than experts. And I think that was another thing that was common here, was looking at, and it wasn't so much like looking for the right answers in the data, but it was more about like investigating and trying and testing um it was kind of, yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. What other things in the book, or what other things kind of related to any of these topics? Oh, and Elon Musk mentioned in the book, and it's interesting to hear Elon Musk mentioned in without the current context of everything that happened, but that was kind of interesting. Was the acquaintance was the there was some interesting things in there about the, making space travel less expensive by doing all that. And again, I thought, are there ways between that idea of making travel less expensive and then the idea of like going for the world's best coffee? Like, are those some things that we could apply to kind of cut through and get to some other solutions that some innovative solutions and some different things. But yeah, it was always interesting to hear Elon Musk. And then Scott Stratton, our past guest, also mentioned in the book, and that was pretty cool. And I hadn't really heard the the um the way that he goes and does his keynote speeches, um and that was again, the same idea of kind of just sticking to what you're doing. And I thought that was also a really neat thing to have somebody who we've talked with remarked on the book, and it was true to his thing. So Yeah, and trouble taking the book seriously when Elon Musk was the example. Now, in fairness, I think this was written a little while ago, so I don't think this was, not that he wasn't, not that he always hasn't been, yeah, someone who has been kind of on the fringe and socially, but yeah, looked up the publication date, yeah, to see, like, yeah, this happened, yeah, 2019, yeah, pre-pandemic Elon, yeah, when we were like, oh, what a great engineer. I recently saw a clip of him when he was on the Big Bang Theory, and which was a while ago, and he did not look, even then, he did not look quite as, he seemed more more like the respectable engineer than kind of what we've learned that and if anybody's a fan of Elon Musk, I'm not but I think it's clear that he's changed the environment in social media quite a bit. Um but yeah, pretty interesting. Um yeah, and again, as I go through my notes, a lot of them are all these same things. I liked I forget what it was called at the end. It was so there was a thing about procrastination. Well, I want to type here. Oh, am I hitting the wrong button? It was the it was the monkey that takes your attention. Um, I can't remember
The
what it was.
instant gratification
Instant
monkey. I
gratification
had to look
monkey.
up the TED Talk and I just laughed.
I haven't watched it, Tammy. Is it good? I'm
Yes,
sure
it's fun.
yeah. Yeah. So again, if you hadn't had a chance or didn't make it to the end, right in the end of the book, he talks about this concept of the instant gratification monkey. And I just loved the example of, he takes the wheel. He says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened. And oh man, I am a terrible procrastinator. I get really distracted, and this has helped me kind of keep that concept in mind recently. Of wait a minute, this is that sensation. This is that feeling of I'm going down this rabbit hole for no reason, and I have things to go through and do. So that was a pretty neat little thing. Anything else? We've got, we still got a few minutes, but anything else that um, anybody else wanted to share about the book, about Jay? Has anybody listened to his podcast? I'm going to admit that I haven't listened to Angela, you have. I haven't listened to, if you listen Unthinkable.
Yeah.
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 And pretty true to kind of this same spirit.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I read this book when it came out in 2019. I don't have my copy anymore. I gave it to somebody. So, but I remember where it was. I read it in one day while I was at a horse show with my daughter.
Quick read,
So
yes.
I remember it. And it's interesting to me to watch the evolution of his ideas. So he's still saying kind of the same things, but in different ways. I recorded a video today about how to it was about email marketing, of course. And I used a quote from his recent, like, he's also does posts on LinkedIn, and he has his blog. And I feel like there's this quote that he's been saying a lot lately, which is don't be the best, be their favorite, which I feel like is an evolution of some of the things that he said in this book in 2019. So it's interesting to me how he just kind of distills it down as he goes along. And to me, that really resonated with me, because a lot of us in library world, we're trying to, first of all, we feel like when we send things out, they have to be perfect, and they don't. And if you make a mistake, it's authentic and people actually like that. It reminds them that there are human beings at the library doing this work.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes also, not this group, but sometimes I think senior leaders of libraries and board members put a lot of emphasis on winning awards. I know that was certainly the case when I worked in Cincinnati. Boy, oh boy, that was like one of our number one goals is when, we got to get our 5-star from Library Journal every year, and we got to win the IMLS medal, and we got to get all this stuff. And we like put out press releases every time we won an award. Nobody cares. the people that we serve just want the stuff and they want like the service that we provide. And I think that's a really good way to like translate that thought, is that, yay, you won awards, but are you the place that your community comes to, the safe place that they come to, the place they come to for information, where they feel comfortable being themselves, where they can find the collection items that they want? That's what we're all striving for. So yeah, I listened to the podcast. It's really good. He's such a good storyteller, and it's not surprising to me that he said he was not able to make it to today's thing, because like if you listen to his podcast, it just blows my mind. I'm sure it takes a ton of time to edit. And he has 2 small children, so he's often talks also about like trying to get work done. He's it's his company, and he's like I think he's the only one working there. Like I think he's alone still. So he's trying to do that and take care of these 2 little kids sometimes, and it's very human. So yeah, I highly recommend the podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. No, that's great. I would like to listen to it. I will check it out. And I'm also looking forward to this new one, this how stories happen, which should be, really neat and also well aligned with what kind of things we do. And and Angela, in the book, there's this thing, and it's kind of in this VC discussion of the woman who created First Round Review. She was trying to create the Harvard Business Review of for VCs. And so kind of playing off of what you said that he's saying now, it's don't be the best, be their favorite. And maybe I don't know, this seems to connect with that somehow, but he's talking about the goal isn't merely to create something different. So it's maybe even kind of part of that being the favorite. Anybody can be weird for no reason. The key is doing something different and purposeful. So that seems like it kind of is leading into that, like purposefully being their favorite and not just trying to be different, not just trying to do something unusual, but trying to do something that, aiming for different. And we've heard that, I know there are other speakers who talk about that. One that actually, so there's some that there's one friends with who talks about that, and the whole thing is about be different. And it's like, well, yeah, that's close, but it's not quite that. I really like that idea of like, don't be the best, be their favorite, which again, I think, I forget if Tammy or Anna, I forget who, or Michelle, we're talking about, maybe Tammy was talking about super fans and how this kind of aligned. And that's the sort of that same idea in super fans, right? It's like, you want them to be your favorite. You want them to, it's not just about that kind of, striving for the best conversion, but striving for somebody to really be your favorite. So yeah, well, that's pretty. Oh, and the one last thing, there was one other thing that I wanted to. Oh, was the Webster Dictionary thing. That was something that I thought, again, libraries might be able to, it certainly would be an interesting one to emulate that same idea, but it's hard to capture that kind of thing yourself. But I thought that was a really neat idea. And Anna kind of talks to your same point of, sharing information with people and creating a conversation around information. And that was so cool. I don't know if they're still doing it the same way, because I thought I checked on their social media. It didn't seem quite the same, but maybe it is still out there. But even to see the internet go crazy over the idea that a hot dog is a sandwich sounds awesome. So yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And before we go, we have 1, 2, oh, that's me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, 3, 6, 9. So, Anna, why don't you pick a number between 1 and 9?
9.
9. All right, that's Michaela. So, and Michaela, I probably said your name wrong again. I need to write down the pronunciation of your name phonetically, because I think I say it all wrong every time. But you want a copy of the book, so despite that, you want a copy of the book. The book next month is Don't Make Me Think. There is a revised edition. There's also an old edition, but there's a revised edition. So if you can find, either one, you got it there, Mary. Yes, that's the one. Yeah. So, while it's certainly about web, I think it's going to be something that is going to be, I've always found it to be very interesting. I mean, a lot of us certainly, hopefully most of us have some control over our library's website or, our library's web presence. Now, Tammy, you're laughing. No, oh no.
We don't even have a Facebook page anymore.
Oh no.
Yeah, we have
Oh.
nothing.
Well, it is applicable to a lot of presentations, so I think you'll still
Yeah.
get something out of it. There's a lot of good ideas in it about, and maybe it can even give you some clout to get closer to having your own page or something. But it's a pretty neat book. It's got some pretty interesting concepts. I am going to reach out to the author and see if there's any chance he can join us. That would be interesting. And then we'll see. I think we got a lot of votes in our last round of voting for a book, so we may have another one that was super popular that we'll go forward with. But yeah, so next month, and I think, well, because it's the 29th, next month we are not on the 27th, we are on the 26th. So March 26th will be at 3:00. And but thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for participating and for listening, and really appreciate it. And if you have anything, please questions or suggestions or anything anytime, send email, share it on the Facebook group. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.